Partnered by Times Influence.
IIMBue Leadership Conclave, the flagship event organized by the Indian Institute of Management Bangalore, brought together globally renowned thinkers, achievers and the entire IIMB alumni over a weekend for thought-provoking conversations, fun and nostalgia. The two-day conclave focused on the theme Sensing the Future and discussed changing trends that are dominating the leadership space, addressed complex leadership challenges for the future, and also opened avenues for networking and driving innovation. Kickstarting the events of the day on a high note was spiritual guru Sadhguru and Bollywood actor Ranveer Singh.
I feel a compulsion to entertain people. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, so many people cannot even smile or laugh unless they sit in a cinema. They can't do it with their neighbors, they can't do it with their family. The best place for them is a cinema hall, they can laugh because it's a dark place. So you're doing a good job, I heard.
Sometimes I feel like there's nothing better I can do with myself than to entertain people, you know. It's like, this is one thing I know I can do it well, and I can, I can make people smile. I love to do that. You know, when somebody sees me on the road, they're like, ah! And then I'm like, hey! You know, you give that energy back to them and it lights them up. I find it fills me up with some euphoric feeling.
It is also needed right now. Entertainment is very needed because people are not simply ecstatic by themselves. Entertainment is very, very needed. Otherwise, a lot of them would sink into depressions. So, you are doing a very cheap psychiatry. When I say cheap, I mean inexpensive. Not cheap means that way, no. I didn't mean that way. I meant very…
It's not cheap, 500 bucks to go to a multiplex nowadays.
I know,
on the
but
weekend.
to go to your psychiatrist, do you know what's the fee? So, inexpensive psychiatry, at least they go there for those 3 hours, they feel good and they come… Especially in a country like India, where a whole lot of people are living in abject poverty. I think cricket and cinema is keeping the mood of the country little up. I wish slowly that changes in the sense that people will be joyful by their own nature. They don't need…
Arey please, Guruji, I'll be out of a job, yaar.
Then I will teach you how to do something else which will still…
Asli psychiatry. If I were to say this, make this statement, I want to be at one, at peace with myself. What do you suggest I do?
See, peace is a very poor aspiration. No. Why I'm saying this is no, this is not to just negate you. Unfortunately, even so-called spiritual leaders are going about saying the ultimate goal of life is to be peaceful. I'm asking all of you a simple question. Every one of you know the answers. It's just that somehow you determine not to use it in your life. It's not that you do not know. Tell me, can you enjoy your lunch? Even if you're not ecstatic, at least you must be peaceful to enjoy your lunch, isn't it so? Hello? A handful of people who live around you, work with you, can you enjoy their presence? Even if you're not blissful, at least you must be peaceful, isn't it? Just to enjoy your walk on the street, you must at least be peaceful, is it so? So I'm asking, is peace a fundamental requirement in your life or is it the ultimate goal of your life? Fundamental requirement. So why is somebody making it as the last thing that will happen in your life? It must be the first thing that happens to you, isn't it? So, do not ever hold peace as a ultimate aspiration because peace is a basic requirement. Every creature, if their stomach is full, they sit peacefully, except human beings. Yes or no? You have a dog at home, feed him well, he sits there peacefully, isn't it? What is the human problem? The human problem is just this, they are not able to handle their own intelligence, that's all their problem is. If you are blissed out, you are never the issue in your life. This one thing everybody must make sure. There are 1,000 issues in life, but I'm not the issue. That means you have decided you're always a part of the solution, never a part of the problem. You got it right.
I have a feeling you and I can hang a lot. We can become bros. Everybody in here has to get up and do the same step. Come on.
Sadhguru and Ranveer Singh's tete-a-tete was followed by a gleeful dance that left the audience stunned and wanting for more. A panel of industry experts joined ET Now's Chandra Srikanth to discuss India's potential to transform itself into a $5 trillion economy from being a part of the fragile five.
PM Modi first made this statement on marching from fragile five to a $5 trillion economy. What will it take to touch the $5 trillion mark?
Actually, as it happens, not much at all. Let me just explain the simple math to it. We are at something like 2.8 trillion economy today. So if we grow at 12% nominal, then, and the exchange rate stays the same, we'll easily be at 5.6 trillion in the next 6 years. You add to that one historical fact, and that is that the currencies, remember this is in dollars. So the currencies of developing countries, especially fast-growing developing countries like India, or China before, or Indonesia, etc., their currencies tend to appreciate, means become stronger over time, very gradually, because the central bank chiefs of these countries, including India, intervene to prevent too much appreciation. The point I'm making is that, look, it is very reasonable to expect that the rupee, which is today at 69 or so, would be something like 63, 64 in the next 5 years. That gives you an additional 10%. So we don't need to grow at 12%, we need to grow only at 11%, nominal, mind you. And so therefore I think, you know, getting to a $5 trillion economy is, if I might say so, a done deal. That's not the real big question. There are other big questions, but I think a $5 trillion, but you know, look, we never thought this was possible 10 years ago. That's how much things have changed in India, or 14 years ago when we really started expanding.
Dejramani, I want to take it to you. You know, there's no doubt that on the reform front, the government has executed some game-changing ones in the last year. What are the micro challenges towards this $5 trillion figure?
I think, Mr. Bala, you said it, right? 5 trillion is a possibility. It's absolutely a possibility. I think the question which has to be, I don't think it has to be debated, but it has to be decided on is by when. There are, as we think through these, there are a few factors that come into play, right? First is globalization. Today, it's not just, I mean, the countries are not just connected to each other. We are very dependent on each other. What happens to India and how fast India grows is, unfortunately, not going to be dependent 100% on India. It's also going to factor in what happens to China. It's also going to factor in what happens to US. The second is digitization. Technology today is pretty much driving changes across. Well, there is no business that is not touched by technology. There is no government that is not touched by technology. I think one of the places where technology can create the maximum impact is agriculture. And my little understanding of the economy, there are, I think if I break it down and I look at what's needed for us to get to that 5 trillion or get that boost needed to get to 5 trillion faster, Services has to double. It's 1.3 today, it has to go minimum to 3. Manufacturing has to more than double. It has to get to $1 trillion at least. And agriculture, which is today less than $500 billion, it's around 500 or 300 billion if I'm not wrong. That has to get to at least $1 trillion. So that's where you need a massive boost because it's more than double. And that's the role technology can play. I think the third one to me, which is critical for success, is inclusion. And India cannot keep that topic under the table. Urban, rural, gender, pick your favorite one. And you will find that there is a huge disparity. We have to get that. We have to figure out how to make inclusion happen. And I think the last one for me is frankly the one that scares me the most. And that's the mindset. I think we make brilliant plans. We are tremendously good in strategizing. Honestly, we have some of the best plans and best strategies. Somewhere we lose the plot when it comes to execution, especially when I'm talking about execution at scale, mass execution, which is the kind which will be needed. How do we mobilize this entire nation and the demographic dividend, as we call it, the advantage that we have of a young nation? How do we mobilize that to drive this change? I mean, those are the 4 things that I think are going to be critical to get right.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
We like to believe over the last 10 to 15 years, we had a great vision, we had great insight, we identified an opportunity which was practically non-existent. We identified a vision, we identified a gap, and around that vision, we developed a foresight. Very, very early, I think, we realized that in everything we do, there are different sets of stakeholders. For example, in an enterprise, there are 3 stakeholders which are extremely, extremely critical and important. One stakeholder is your investor and shareholder. The other stakeholder is essentially employees. And the third stakeholder is your client. Okay. And these 3, in their own way, essentially make up the entire ecosystem. For an organization to be successful, it needs all these 3 stakeholders to be extremely, extremely happy. And I think any organization cannot build a friction-free relationship between these 3. Because at any point of time, these 3 are always inherently at a little bit of conflict with each other. Okay? Investors and shareholders would ideally want employees to be paid less. Employees would need to make more profits from their clients. Clients would inherently want employees and the firm to make less money. Okay? So at all points of time, this is a relationship which works on a paradox with each other. But to a large extent, organizations which have succeeded have been able to build, I can't call a frictionless, but as close to possible, a friction-free relationship between these 3 stakeholders. We were able to do it between investors and employees by having more than 1/3 of our company owned by employees. And therefore, the friction between the investors, shareholders, and the employees substantially mellowed down because the investors and the employees were pretty much on the same side of the table. With clients, by trying to develop a fee which was unique in its own way, aligned with their interest, we are able to build a much, much more transparent relationship. And I think the ability to today build a friction-free kind of relationship between all these 3 stakeholders in a paradoxical environment is something which will be key for us to maintain over a long period of time to come. Thanks a lot and look forward to seeing all of you.
IIMBue is one flagship event of IIMB where it's trying to bring all the alumni together. IIMB alumni are across the world. They're almost on every continent. Now this is one event which physically brings everybody together to network, to exchange knowledge and wisdom. And this is our 3rd IIMBue and it rocks.
IIMBue is like a child. We, the alumni together, we work together in like a very loose hierarchy. People are very successful entrepreneurs, very successful professionals, having day jobs in their own right. And getting an event of this magnitude together, getting all the speakers, getting the registrations, getting the sponsorships, is just unbelievable that this event is happening at this scale. And I hope this inspires other people to understand that anything is possible if you set your goal correctly, if you focus on it, and you collaborate together.
IIMBue Leadership Conclave put the spotlight on bringing out the best strategies that can lead to breakthrough innovations. Industry experts and thought leaders shared their insights on the same.
I don't believe we have any shortness of intelligence. We just want to work on the right things. And the right things could come from a lot of you. So what we need to do, guys, focus on technology and business model-driven innovations. The Ubers, the Olas, many such service-driven innovations could also come from India. What we need to do is be a little bit more risk-taking. Be that maverick who drives change. We guys need to do a little bit more in innovation. We want to be innovating at the same level you are marketing. So I really feel the engineering folks, the business folks who are driving, service-driven economy, who are identifying areas to focus on, need to work together to drive this change.
Decisions, deliberations, and paving the path for creative innovation rechristened IIMBue as one of the best platforms for knowledge sharing. Taking cognizance of this, a panel of experts further dissected the growing scope for AI, machine learning, and analytics.
I'm going to start with you, Prashant. In terms of, AI and data, how is it impacting fintech and particularly loans? Because credit is going to be the next big thing.
Today we talked about the emerging middle class, the demanding middle class, and how they are our future. And in order for them to be our future, they need to have access to structured credit, whether they are micro SMEs, SMEs, or even consumers, right? The banks have unfortunately dropped the ball, right? So in some ways, the biggest innovations in bank perhaps happened about 20 years ago, and they haven't quite kept up with the generation that we are serving today. The bureaus have dropped the ball. So 30 million of us are on the bureau, whereas we have a society of, I think, 600 million transacting consumers. So for the remaining, it has to be, the fintech or the lending has to be on the back of alternate data. It has to be on the back of, all things AI and model-based. So we're not doing AI for the sake of doing AI, because it's a buzzword and gets us the valuations.
Yeah, there are so many startups that end with .ai these days. So.
But we're actually almost compelled to, right? So we are in the business of doing short-term personal loans. So these are loans under 2 lakh rupees. Most of our consumers need this because there's an emergency, a medical emergency in the house. There's a home renovation project that needs to get done in an urgency. There's a wedding that has come up. There's a travel plan that has to get sorted out. And for that, when you say small ticket, you have to read small earnings. Small earnings means I don't have the ability to even put an army of people to process these loans, unlike the banks, where they can. They're all doing 5 lakh rupee loans, 10 lakh rupee loans. There's enough earnings there. So we are almost compelled to not only use this data, but that's kind of the primary driver for what we do it.
Snehal, can AI really be the solution for, everything and every field, or do we have to think about where this will be applicable, where it won't be? And what impact is this going to have on jobs?
Initially, when we started Mezi, everything was, whenever a customer comes in, they were served by travel agents, and we were using that data to build AI, right? And over the 2-year span, we reached a stage where our AI today is serving 60% of the consumers. So if you come start talking to Mezi, you will feel you're talking to a human, but you're actually talking to a bot, right? And the first sign of success was when a travel agent went to his manager and said that he is not secured about his job, because now bot is, he can actually see real time
that's
that the
actually
bot is
scary,
serving the
isn't it?
Right? But the goal there is, today if you look at our user base, we want to reach 100 million card members. Amex has 100 million card members. You cannot reach them with the current travel agents that you have. Even if you have 10,000 travel agents, you cannot reach 100 million users. So how do you take that travel agent and make him a super travel agent? So take a human and make him a superhuman. And that's our job. So the bots actually allow you to be a superhuman, right? So a job that you were doing today, you can do 10x of that, and that is how we look at it. And AI will take away jobs, but the thing is that if they will start taking away jobs at the lower level, right? So I think cities, companies need to start educating that sector and try to make them better than what they are today. So for example, if I'm a travel agent today, that job is now been converted into being an AI trainer for travel. right? So that's a shift that is going to happen.
Okay, so AI is going to make us superhumans. That's your take. Mukul, very interesting space. You first co-founded Jabong, and then you joined a traditional group called Arvind, which is a big player in the textile space. How resistant have brands been to adapting to this new normal where everything is connected?
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize it as worried. I think what's happening is brands and retailers are rationalizing channels, right? So if you look at the offline world, what organized retail over the last, let's call it 3 decades in India has done really well is rationalize the offline channel in terms of what each offline channel does for you, right? So you have your EBOs, your brand stores, you have your MBOs, shoppers, lifestyles, and multi-brand outlets. You have your distributors and wholesalers, which is the trade channel, and then you have discounters. All of these channels do a very different job in what they do, for a retail or a brand. One obviously giving brand building, the other providing reach, third giving you more of access, fourth giving you liquidation. What's happening now is that same approach is being pushed into the digital world, where for the first time you are rationalizing your digital channel. Your online EBO does something very different than an Amazon does for you, versus a wholesaler versus a discounter online. So now you're finally seeing a rationalization of channels and a connecting of channels happening. And if you do this in a smart way, you now have access to your consumer across all channels, because you're actually even able to understand what your consumer is shopping on your .com and on Amazon for the first time. So that's where I think the growing push is that let's connect the offline and the online world and rationalize what each channel does for us from a data point of view also.
Right. I want to take it to the professor there. Nandan Nilekani often likes to say that India is going to be a data-rich country before it can become economically rich. And that's already something that's happening in a huge way. If you look at the way internet usage has exploded in the last year, I guess largely thanks to Jio. How can startups or corporations really leverage this huge amount of data that's getting generated every second?
Yeah, for the past 6 to 8 years, we've been talking about big data, right? And we have a lot of it. And I want to comment on 3 things. One is, going forward, it's going to be a better data revolution and not a big data revolution. And what I mean by better, whether it's structured or unstructured, what I mean by better data is that there needs to be some natural variation in the variables that we're looking at, right? If there is no variation in this data, like let's take retail, for example. You're talking about online and offline, right? Let's say the retailers, do not vary their prices, right? So no amount of big data will help AI or machine learning and so on, because it's garbage in and garbage out, because there is no variation. So going forward, I think we want to look for better data and not just big data, right? And the second point I want to make is that it's going to be a better models revolution. Because when I talk to managers, what they say is, hey, I've got this humongous amount of data, millions and millions of, hundreds of millions of observations, structured or unstructured, but we don't know what to do with it, right? That's where, the better models revolution is art and science. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind. So when we combine this better data with better models, we were able to increase the profitability relative to control stores in this chain by about 40.7 cents per week per store, per SKU, and it translates to about $8 million gross margin.
So not big data, but better data. So, yeah. But on that note, thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoyed the session.
IIMBue is a leadership conclave, and we've been building it since 2015. Actually, IIMBue itself is like a startup, and it's grown and sustained in a very satisfying, gratifying way over the last 3 years. In fact, this year we've seen double the number of participation, and also the quality of discussions, and all that has been constantly moving up over the years.
IIMBue is focusing on is the networking between the alumnus of IIM Bangalore. So what we have here is people coming from multiple programs, multiple batches. This gives them a chance to actually come together and interact with each other.